Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose. You can find me at ThunderGruntBob on all the dumb social medias. And right now, Jimmy is going to introduce himself.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter, X, whatever handle is at Jimmy R. George, and my Threads handle is @_Jimmy George.
And yeah, now Jamie, or Pazuzu, as his
Pazuzu,
as his name on the Zoom says.
Yes, I am Jamie Nash. I am a screenwriter, and I am also the writer of two Save the Cat books: Save the Cat Writes for TV and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. Go buy them on Amazon. And my Twitter handle is Jamie_Nash. I'm not on any of the new stuff yet, so find me there.
But I just want to point out, not to like drag Jamie here, but you spelled Pazuzu wrong.
Yeah, I kind of knew.
He spelled it with an E.
Hey, I thought it, so you might as well say it.
I kind of knew I was spelling it wrong, but that's part of the sinister, diabolical nature.
Right. There's the evil. That's the evil. As you might, if you know who Pazuzu is, you already know what we're doing, which is we're talking about The Exorcist, the original, not any of the 5 sequels now.
Yeah, I think we're on number 5.
If you count the prequel twice, because they made 2 versions of it, remember?
If you count the prequel twice, I think it's...
By the way, it's a bit of a spoiler, but I'm working on IP for a Pez movie called Pezuzu. It's a possessed Pez dispenser.
You heard it here first.
It bites your tongue when you're trying to eat. Yeah.
It's part of the green lights after Barbie. Like they just want a movie for everything.
That's right. So that slipped out. You weren't supposed to say that. You have to sign. Everyone that's listening has to sign an NDA.
The candy inside is spoiled.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is great.
Anyway, we're going to talk about the original Exorcist, William Friedkin's masterpiece from the 70s.
Isn't it 50 years old this
don't
year?
Make me do math.
So.
50 years old, 1973.
Right.
December 26th, 1973.
We're going to talk, before we get into our talking points, we're going to go around and say our relationship with this movie real quick. So who wants to start?
I'll go ahead and start.
Go for it.
I have a couple very insignificant stories, but whatever. So if you've listened to this show in the past, you might have heard me talk about how different my dad's point of view on movies is. He's the man who doesn't really give a shit about characters. He says nobody watches movies for characters. So very different from me. So the one and only time in my life that my dad got excited to show me a movie was this one. We when I was 12 years old, so 1992, I had a sleepover with a couple friends, and he was like, "What do you guys want to do?" And we were like, we want to go to Blockbuster and get a scary movie. And he was like, "All right, I'm going to get you the scariest movie of all time." And he showed it to us, and we didn't have the heart to tell him at that time. We were cocky 12-year-olds. We were like, it wasn't that scary.
Right.
But, as I've gotten older, of course, I think it's like a masterpiece, and I think it's very scary and a very hard watch as an adult. And then my second story is the first feature film that I co-wrote and co-produced, the one and only film festival that we got into. It was in 2007 in Modesto, California, called Shockerfest. And the highlighted guest was Eileen Dietz, who is the stunt double for Reagan in all of the bed stuff. And the movie they were showing was, after all of the festival entries, they were also having a big revival screening on the big screen of The Exorcist. So I got to technically play alongside The Exorcist in a film festival with our movie Book of Lore, and got to meet Eileen Dietz and got to see it on the big screen in a film festival crowd. So it was really fun. And yeah, those are my 2 Exorcist stories.
Cool. Jamie or Pazuzu, sorry.
Pezuzu. Yeah, so I saw this in the theater when it came out when I was 2 years old. No, I'm just kidding. It was the first movie I ever saw.
The first thing you ever saw.
First thing. Yeah. and I remembered it. I loved it. It was my favorite movie. I as you can see, I have a poster over here signed by Linda Blair.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this movie is it's very interesting in that. So it came out when I was a baby, but it weighed heavy as I got into of age, and it got much like Jaws. Jaws came out a little bit before I saw it in the theater, but The Exorcist was a very similar movie in that it came out and people were talking about, people were reading the book, and I grew up Catholic, so this movie was like. But by the way, all the Catholics went to see it. They devoured this movie in a weird sort of way, even though they believed it was kind of evil and they shouldn't be watching it and it was taboo and they were kind of freaked out by it. Like, all the adult Catholics kind of went and saw this movie, which is kind of weird, in some ways, but they did. They rushed to it. So in some ways it was this movie was kind of a true story. And, or this could happen, or this would happen, or something like that. So I grew up kind of under that shadow of this is that thing that could happen. And for that reason, this movie kind of scared me. Like I didn't want to see it for a long time. And I think I saw it more in bits and pieces over the years. Like I saw the end more than I saw the beginning. So I think I don't even remember when I saw the whole thing, to be honest. But it wasn't when I was really affected by it. When I was really affected by it was when I just saw the bits and pieces of it. It was mostly the end that I saw the exorcism scenes. Because then when I went back and I said, she's an actor? What is this? And there's a detective going around and, all that stuff. It was kind of confusing to me in some ways because I knew the end so well. But so between that, and I did read the book at a very early age. I may have read the book before I saw the entire movie. So, the book definitely informed me and stuff like that. And I was into exorcisms and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. And kind of especially in that I read all the books by basically the Catholic priests who claim to do exorcisms and stuff like that over the years. So in that way, this movie loomed large. And if you would have asked me, like, what's the scariest movie? For many, many years, I would say this movie was the scariest movie because I was kind of afraid to watch it. It was kind of, and I remember when I finally did watch it, maybe I was around 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range. And I remember, like, I never really took a movie with me. But I remember like sleeping at night and hearing the air conditioner and thinking something was whispering in my room and, that kind of thing. And it really did freak me out or stick with me a little more than some other movies. So that's my Exorcist. But for a while, I'd say it was the scariest movie I've ever seen. And anytime I watched it, I'd have to kind of ready myself and be in the right mood. Not anymore. Now I watch it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just kind of watching it. I've definitely hardened over the years that it doesn't frighten me that much, or I don't even think twice about it. But anyway,
cool.
That's The Exorcist.
I was raised Catholic. I'm Italian, raised Catholic. So, I do have that connection to this movie, but that's, Jamie already covered that. And, I love this movie. It's a masterpiece, all that stuff. But I want to say the same thing I always seem to say on the show, which is I came to The Exorcist late. And the thing that I saw before The Exorcist several times was Repossessed with Leslie Nielsen. I saw that on Comedy Central in the 90s so many times before I ever just sat down and watched The Exorcist. So it's one of those things where culture kind of spoiled The Exorcist for me. And then when I saw it, like Jamie said, it's not it wasn't the scariest movie I ever saw. It was good. It just wasn't the scariest movie I ever saw. So, and back then I just, I was younger, but I'll say this. Remember the director's cut? I believe that's on the poster behind you, Jamie.
It is. Yeah. By the way, that's what I watched for this.
How dare you?
Because I own it.
I know.
It's the one I own,
fine.
So I just watched it.
It's on Max too, the original cut.
Oh, really?
The original cut.
Really? Okay.
But remember when that came back to theaters and it was like a huge deal? Like I remember going to the movie theater with my friends on like a Friday night in 2000, I want to say. And it was like a packed house to watch the director's cut of The Exorcist. That's something I don't even know, like, if they would ever do again or that would be received
Yeah,
as
in
well.
just of any movie ever.
There was like a line at White Marsh for people waiting to see The Exorcist in 2000. It was nuts. They had like spit pee vomiting contest before the movie started and shit. It was awesome. Like people were really excited. And so anyway, that's one of my favorite, like of a top 5 favorite movie going experiences is seeing The Exorcist
awesome.
director's cut in theaters. You know, but
I mean, the similar thing was when Lucas re-released the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, well, Star Wars
did have a big bounce.
Is its own beast, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're talking about The Exorcist, though. Like,
yeah,
it's weird to have a special. It wasn't a special edition. It was just a different cut with an old scene added in, where they just removed wires. Really, right? I mean,
yeah. I think there's additional medical footage.
Yes, you're right.
You know, and stuff like that. A little bit of expanded in the beginning, and you know some.
I like the director's cut. I'm not trying to dog on the director's cut at all. I'm just saying, it surprised me back then, and now thinking back, it surprises me even more how much power this movie had. That re-releasing it, actually, like it was full of like young people were in the theater to see The Exorcist.
Yeah,
you know, now when I watch it, I'm not scared of it either anymore. It doesn't scare me anymore, but I think it's
funny. I'm the opposite.
Yeah. I know, but I find it to be just such a well-made, amazing movie. So it's like, you know, I still love it.
There was a time when Jaws scared me too, and that doesn't scare me either. I still love Jaws. I think it's great. It just doesn't, you know, I mean, when you see the jump scares a million times and you can you have them memorized, they're not scary anymore. That's kind of the way.
I don't want to waste time, but Jamie, what is the scariest movie?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Exorcist used to be my go-to, but now, especially after I watched it, like the last few times I've watched it, I can't say that with a straight face anymore. I could say it was the scariest movie that affected me at one point in my life. So in some ways, it still is the truthful answer, because no movie scared me as much as this movie in my life. It just isn't the scariest movie now when I reflect back on it, you know? I'd have to say, to me, it's probably something that's a little bit more reality based, or something. I don't know that's the scariest, but I even remember seeing, and this isn't a movie many people have seen, but there's a movie called The Snowtown Murders, and I saw that and it kind of freaked. I was like, man, this is disturbing on a different level. It didn't scare me. It didn't, but it was a true story, and just watching the true story, I think that has something to do with it.
No, I was going to say, like, for me, I don't get scared at movies that much. Like, it's just something that
I don't either.
It doesn't happen. Either. So whenever anyone like talks about their love of horror and getting scared, I'm always like, it doesn't compute for me because I don't get it. You know what I mean?
I either have to do one of two things. I have to go back to a time when a movie did scare me, and The Exorcist was one, Jaws was one, there's Poltergeist was one. I have to go back to a time when movies did affect me, which was many, many years ago. Or I have to kind of say, like, almost from a craftsman's perspective, like, what's this movie that's, I think, is the most frightening to an audience? And, you know, so then I'm in a different place thinking about it. But when I really think, like, what movie scared me, it's hard. That's a hard question. Just pure and simple. Like if I watch that, I'll never watch that again because it scared me. If a movie was really like that, if it really scared me, I probably wouldn't watch it, to be honest. If
you're not looking for that high, huh?
I'm not looking to be scared in my life. I'm scared enough. You know, I don't need. But you know, this is an argument a lot of people have against horror, why they don't watch horror. But I think for a lot of us horror fans, we're scared in the moment, or it's frightening, or we enjoy the craft of being scared, or the kind of game of being scared. But some of us just kind of enjoy the dark storytelling.
Yeah,
you know, we like I like gallows humor. I like darkness. There's just something, even in an adventure movie, I kind of like darkness, you know, a little darkness, and taste it. Like in Lord of the Rings, I like how it mixes a little bit of dark flavor and horror in it or something. So I don't know. This is a long.
I think it's an important thing to talk about, because we are talking about the scariest movie ever made, quote unquote, right? Like, why do audiences want that is always a weird question to me. I used to manage a video store, and people would say, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen? And I go, I don't know. And then I'd recommend something, and then they come back and complain that it wasn't scary enough. And I'm like, And they were like, "This scared you?" And I was like, "No, nothing scares me. It's fake."
And-
I was like, "Movies are fake." You
And
know?
I have this as a topic for later, but I've been mulling around. I've been kind of journaling, writing a book, whatever, about horror recently, and I started to think about this topic of why I think The Exorcist was the scariest movie at the time. It's funny. I'm not really ready to. I want to look up my notes on it. Let me see if I can find them.
I mean, for me, I think the connection is religious. I think that's what I would say for a lot of, at least for a lot of people that I would know in my family and stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I was raised Catholic. There is some, it's speaking to that religion specifically, right? I mean, there is that direct connect.
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was thinking about how in the climax, the power of Christ compels you. I was thinking to myself as I was watching it, like, I wonder how other people of other religions respond to this particular part, like of how the power of Christ compels you.
They might be like, Christ. It might take him out of the movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I have a good friend who does listen to the show. His name is Jeff, and he is Jewish, and he has said, I've been on his show several times, and whenever this comes up, he's like, it's a great, well-made movie. I respect it completely. It doesn't scare me at all because it doesn't possession and stuff. It just doesn't ring to anything. There's no personal connection there. We did an Exorcist 3 podcast together, and we talked about this.
Didn't he see the Dybbuk box movie? Was that Possession?
I did. I saw that in theaters. It was okay. Yeah. That movie was okay.
So in this kind of pseudo book that one day I might publish or something, but I kind of asked myself, like, there are kind of two types of horror scares, in my opinion, right? There's one that I call kind of the Ooga Booga horror. Like it's and the Ooga Booga comes from, I was working on, I did the Busch Gardens Halloween event one year. Like I wrote like a lot of the marketing with Ben Rock. He's the Blair Witch guy who did the stick figure, and he and I were talking because when we were designing the stuff for Busch Gardens that year, and he was like, I don't really like haunted houses. You just walk through and a bunch of people jump out at you and go, Ooga Booga, and that's it. And I was like, yeah, I kind of see that too. And I think there are some horror movies that are just all about the Ooga Booga. That's all they are.
Jump scares, right?
Jump scares, frightening moments. They're in the moment, the reality. But I think the reason I peg The Exorcist, maybe there's some other movies like Blair Witch might come to mind. They're stick to your nerves. They're take home horror. You know what I mean? They're takeaway horror in some ways. I call them parting. They give you parting gifts that when you get home, you remember them. And this is why I picked The Exorcist as my scariest movie, because it did that to me years ago. And I think there's 3 keys if you want to do this. If you want to have that, it's kind of a mean thing to do, is to give people parting gifts to scare them in their life, to give them more anxieties. But as a horror writer, I am kind of mean. I'm a mean person. I mean, that's what they're there for. That's what they're paying for. I want you to remember my movie, so I'm going to give you a parting gift to remember it by. And I think some of them, so I broke it down to 3 things you could do to kind of give this kind of parting gift horror. One is confront our actual fears and beliefs. Like just do something that embodies what we actually think might be true and real. And Exorcist does that. So if you're a Catholic, if you believe in possession, and especially back in the 1970s when parapsychology was getting kind of hot and we weren't quite to the era where everything was being debunked. Like
TikTok didn't exist.
TikTok didn't exist. There were a lot of things, like when I watched In Search Of and stuff, I just kind of accepted them as real because they were on TV, and nobody was saying,
why would they film it if it wasn't true?
Why would they film it? Yeah. So it's kind of the start of that, but there really was no pushback against that stuff. And The Exorcist fed right into that. So whether, the UFOs of fire in the sky, the Conjuring series, which is all kind of based on true stories, anything that could kind of some people might believe is real. And that's why serial killer movies and Halloween and stuff like that, always work. And then the other two things that I come up with: horror on home turf. So anytime you put anything horrible in somebody's home turf, you're leaving them with a parting gift, because whether it's, the clown and Poltergeist, like if we have a clown or creepy doll or something like that, we might get creeped out and say, well, in Poltergeist that happened, and it starts planting seeds in your head.
Chucky.
Or Chucky.
Right.
On the ocean and Jaws. I mean, we all go swimming, the beach and stuff like that. So now suddenly we're thinking about that because we're swimming as well. And then, the Blair Witch Project, going camping or something.
Lost in the Woods.
Lost in the Woods. The bedroom window of Salem's Lot. Now we're staring at our window and there's a tapping. What is it? Could it be that creepy kid? So anything like that, if you can put it on things we all recognize and we all experience, that's the second part of the parting gift. And then the third part that I thought about: everyday questions, horrible answers. So this movie has at least one of those. What's that noise up in the attic? Must be rats. No, it's not rats. We give you a horrible answer.
It's Pazuzu.
Yeah. So any minor mystery you have, and is that a plumbing issue, or I wonder why my door was open last night. Things like that. If you can provide horrible answers to those everyday questions, then you can give people parting gifts. So they were kind of the three things I analyzed as my parting gift horror, if that you can add to your mix.
I was going to say, with that in mind, it's like this movie, what Jaws does for going to the water, this movie does for Ouija boards, right? I mean, straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, it did, right? Like, people were literally like, they're a tool of evil after this movie came out, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't even know that I really knew that until I went back. Almost like it was a chicken egg thing, like which came first in my life. And I think Ouija boards came before I realized how prevalent they were, how important they were to The Exorcist.
Once Parker Brothers started selling them, it was like they took the magic right out of that.
Well, they probably had a huge boom after this movie.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, let's do what they did in that movie and get possessed.
Okay, so let's get into some stuff.
I jumped the gun a little bit.
Fine.
I jumped in.
No, that's okay.
Fine. No, it was good.
Was perfect timing.
By the way, the box office for this movie, and William Peter Blatty wrote the screenplay to this.
I'm laughing because I was about to say he wrote this shit.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm kind of catching up back to my back.
We're rusty a little bit.
What I skipped over, I'm going back to.
Yeah.
And he wrote the book. He wrote the screenplay. He directed the third movie. Did he really have anything else that he's really well known for?
I don't know.
I'm trying to.
Third movie rules, though. Everyone watch
movie?
Exorcist 3.
Never seen it.
Dude, it's so awesome. Now,
It's,
Exorcist 2, well, you have fun with that.
Yeah. He has some other. He has Mastermind in 1976.
All right.
The Ninth Configuration.
That's
anyway. He has a couple things.
It's a pretty good movie. I
Ninth Configuration.
I watched it recently. Yeah,
1980. And the movie's box office in 1973. So this doesn't, I think, account for the re-releases and things like that. Was kind of huge when you think about it. It was $193 million in 1973. It was the number one top grossing movie of 1973. So it was number one at the box office. And just to give you a feel for some of the things that year, I think is this our oldest movie we've done?
Either Jaws or this. If Jaws came out before.
Yeah, this is
older
before
than Jaws. Yeah.
So this is the oldest movie we've ever discussed. That's exciting.
Yeah. And, Jaws kind of changed things and really put the blockbuster on the map. But looking at this, I mean, I know this didn't have as many theaters, which even makes it more impressive. It didn't have the release strategy Jaws had. But this is a blockbuster. I mean, almost $200 million in 1973. The Sting was right behind it with about 160 million. And then a movie that we think of as a blockbuster kind of breakout film, American Graffiti, was $115 million that year. And and then there's a big drop off. The next movie's 53 million. It's Papillion. Is that how you pronounce that? Then The Way We Were, Magnum Force, Live and Let Die, Robin Hood, Paper Moon, and Serpico are the next. And Serpico only made $28 million at number 10. So it shows you how huge The Exorcist was in comparison to these other movies.
I was going to say I just looked it up, adjusted for inflation in 2022 dollars, it made
like 500.
No, $1.01 billion.
Oh, wow.
That's how big The Exorcist was in 1973.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has tickets sold in this list, and it's close to 110 million. Yeah, that's what it is. Tickets sold.
Well, I mean,
so a third of the country saw it.
Tickets were like $1 and change back then.
Yeah, like you said, take home horror. You tapped into a religion, and 95% of the planet is tapped into that. So do the math.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. We kind of already did talk about why I think this movie often gets scariest movie, right? That's already done. That was what I jumped here. Mm-hmm. Right. So you guys want to talk about The Sin?
Yeah, I brought this up because number one, I wanted to hear Jamie's wind up. I wanted to wind Jamie up and let him go, but also because I think it's debatable, and I like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to,
Okay, so The Sin is something that comes from the Save the Cat, Monster in the House genres. We always talk about the genres on this show, the Save the Cat genres. They're really story patterns. There's 10 types of Save the Cat genres that Blake Snyder came up with. Some of them include Golden Fleece, Buddy Love, what other ones? Dude with a Problem. But the one we talk about all the time is Monster in the House. And the elements of Monster in the House are there's a monster, and it could be human, it could be a curse, it could be all kinds of things, the monster. There's a house, and the house it could be geographic, but it could be the human body or something like that.
It could be the mind, right?
I always say it's kind of also has to do with the trap, like why you can't get away. But that's not something Blake necessarily said, but it's kind of my wrinkle on it. And then last but not least, there's a sin. There's some sin that makes the heroes kind of culpable so that anything could happen in some weird ways. And sometimes it's not committed. Like in this movie, Regan doesn't commit the sin. It can be committed by society, like Poltergeist. The company moved, they built the houses on top of the graveyard and just cleared the tombstones. So it could be something like that. Or an Alien. I'm trying to remember what the Alien one specifically is, but it's kind of the corporate greed of sending them to the planet.
It was greed. Yep.
So it doesn't have to be the main character necessarily commits.
Yeah, they're dealing with the consequences of the sin,
right.
Whatever the sin is. Yes.
Yep. And I always say the reason it's there is it creates this filmic karma situation. Because we know if some sin or atrocity happened, karma dictates that there's a price to be paid, whether it's innocent lives or guilty lives, but there could be some price to pay. So it messes with us as an audience in that we're like, well, yeah, that's the consequence.
If you have sex at camp, Jason's going to get you.
It's very Adam and Eve, it's very original sin kind of idea. But the sin of this movie, what do you think?
I think some people would say it was Reagan. I think some people would say it was Reagan. I'm not saying that, but I think that
I can tell you what Blake Snyder, there's a podcast online, and I haven't listened to this in a long time, but it's the best of Blake. And he basically was giving a lecture. And when he talked about Monster in the House, he referenced The Exorcist as for his sin. And I can tell you what he said.
Okay.
And I tend to agree with it, but then the debatable part comes in that I also kind of can go off with. So what Blake says is the sin is the mother's neglect for her child. That's what he thinks. And the way he posits it, and this is something that I can say resonates with a lot of parents. Neglect is a very strong word, but she has her own life. She's an actress. She's getting divorced. She may not have a lot of time. She kind of pawns her kid off to somebody else. So maybe the guilt there is, am I doing enough for my child? Did I not give her enough attention and, security because I was off doing my thing? And she got into things like Ouija boards and stuff like that when I wasn't looking. So there's a certain sense of, like I said, neglect's a strong word, but you can think, especially in the 70s, single mom who works, and is divorced. There's a lot of that playing in, not necessarily that it's saying that's a bad thing, but it's playing into the guilt that might be associated with a mother and their daughter.
I am not Team Blake here.
That's his
at all.
That's his.
All. Like,
Yeah,
vehemently not him. Go ahead, you guys.
Well, so I'll sort of piggyback off of that and say that he's talking about something that I thought did stand out and was circling around, which is like adjacent to that, which is the notion of choosing your job over your loved ones, because both Chris, Ellen Burstyn's character's name is Chris, because we're going to be talking about her for the rest of the show. Chris is married to her job, and that comes at the expense of Reagan, basically putting her energy into other things, and Damien, Father Karras, is also married to his job, and that comes at the expense of his relationship with his mother, the guilt and shame he feels about not being able to be there for her, so both of those things, you've talked about, Jamie, that the sin is what invites the horror, right? The sin is what invites the monster. So in that way, both of those things are what led to, the evil being able to take advantage of the situation. But there's this whole other side thing.
I hate this. I think that's a terrible explanation. Go ahead. I really don't like it, but it's fine.
And then the other thing, the obvious one is lack of faith. Like they put a lot. Yeah, but see,
obvious.
Bob, that's so obvious.
She's an atheist, and he said he lost his faith.
Right, so that leads to the horror.
That's the sin. The neglect to me doesn't even read on screen. I'm sorry, that doesn't read on screen.
I love that we see it differently for once.
That does not read. I'm almost saying it factually doesn't read on screen.
For me, I think when you meet them and they're doing the things that need fixing section, which I didn't break it down, I think the movie goes out of its way to paint her as a mother who's doing the best she can, but she's a celebrity who's being pulled a whole bunch of different ways. And Reagan is sort of the last thing. It's not that she doesn't care, but it feels like Reagan is the thing that she gets to, is the person in the energy she gets to spend is the least on Reagan, and everybody else is taking care of Reagan. And she's, also left to her own devices. And I do think that's fucking, they lean heavily onto that in that little section of the things that need fixing on Chris's character. And the fact that Damien is doing, they paint the parallel of Damien doing the same thing, right, in his own life.
My objection is because
Jamie hasn't gotten to say.
Go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead, Jamie.
So it's funny because up until this watch, and I haven't watched it in a few years, even in the book I'm slowly writing, that's taking, it's pretty much already done. Whether it'll ever get published or not is another question. But I wrote faith is the thing. I kind of I used it as an example of like a character arc, kind of going from faithless to faith. But when I watched it this time, and honestly, this isn't, it feels like mansplaining or parentsplaining or something. When I watched it this time, thinking, reflecting of who I am now and stuff like that. And my son has autism, and, it almost is metaphoric for like the problems parents go through that they can't control with their own children.
Sure.
And then the guilt that you feel about that, even though you may have nothing to do with it, you do kind of feel guilt about it. You do kind of feel like you're responsible. And to me, this movie was metaphoric of that. Now, whether or not, if you say it's factually not there and stuff, it may be a deeper read into the ultimate metaphor because it's 70s. It's more subtle.
I think everything
it's not
that
on the news.
You're saying is there,
yeah,
but it's not the sin. I'm disagreeing that it is the sin. I don't think that's the sin. I think the sin is much more obvious and straightforward. She's an atheist, modern woman of the modern world. She's more humanist than anything. She didn't even assume anything supernatural could be happening. For her, that world is completely dead. It's old world nonsense. It doesn't exist. Then you have the father who's lost his faith. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just too overtly there.
No, it's definitely
be the sin. The other stuff you're saying though is definitely there. I just don't think it's this category of discussion. That's all.
It could be like it could be like almost the nihilism thing or
something like nihilism, atheism,
where she blames herself, but she's really not to blame. It like the read isn't like she needs to be punished, and but there is a part of me that's like her arc is her arc really that now she's Catholic, or is her arc now that she's going to hold on to Reagan?
That's what I'm saying. Her new way is like she's going to be hyper protective, right?
Yeah, I don't even know that she ever goes to church after this. Like, she doesn't strike me like
I'll give you that.
She finds faith. So anyway,
you could argue Reagan will though with how it ends, right? Like she sees literally the priest and looks at his collar.
We'll find out in the next movie.
Right. Well, you can't count that. You can't count that.
This is great because I put it on there because I thought it was not as cut and dry as you might think. And I'm really surprised to hear that Jamie is seeing what I'm seeing.
I'm just saying it's not the sin. I think the things that Jamie is
debatable. Though.
I think like Jamie, the stuff you said about how a parent can't control the things that are wrong or that they deal with their child, that's all there, and I totally agree. I just don't agree it's the sin. I don't think that Chris it made some mistake. From what I can tell on screen, her daughter and her absolutely have this wonderful, beautiful relationship that makes the horrors of what's to come even worse. So I don't agree there. Like, I think that their relationship being as awesome as it is on screen makes the rest of the movie more horrific. So I just don't see what you're saying as far as a sin. I don't think she's neglectful in that way,
So I would even go so far though to say like her father definitely is neglectful.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Remember,
absolutely.
And
we
don't
know him though.
It could be him that's part of the sin as well. Like,
the movie doesn't show us that. So,
but
they go to great lengths to talk about. Has he called? No.
Right.
It's her birthday. Oh,
it's a modern couple. It's a Catholic movie. It's a modern couple who's getting divorced because marriage doesn't actually mean anything to them. Right. Once again, I think it's more of a humanist lack of faith, modernism, all that. That's what I think the sin is.
I think they're both there. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Bob, but like when we're, from a teaching standpoint, from an instruction standpoint, this sin, when you're like, okay, I got a concept. What can I explore with this concept? Like, and what the sin is supposed to represent the societal ill, right? So the societal ill in 1973 that it feels like this movie is playing with for me is choosing your job over your family. And that is like what we're talking about always when we're saying like when you're doing horror, it's gonna enhance the horror, right? Jamie just talked about that cosmic, that karmic thing. And I feel like it's definitely there that like the karmic thing that there's a side there saying you didn't choose your mother over your vocation. So she got put into an institution, even though she said to you, do not put me into a home because you chose your job.
I think it's the way the movie, to me, it's the way the movie always does it. It like happens to him. Like, she gets like thrown into that institution without him even like giving the okay.
Yeah.
For me, I'm always, whenever I watch the movie, I'm always like, yeah, but you didn't really do anything wrong, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's that part of me where I just don't feel it as much. I'm sorry.
I agree with you,
like,
but I think the movie is trying to argue that he did his neglect.
I would argue that's all set up for Pazuzu to use it later more so than anything.
Right.
I don't think it's
with
the
that.
sin. I'm not gonna. I just don't. I disagree. Everyone yell at me if you think I'm wrong.
No,
No.
is
People,
there.
write in. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, the movie goes to great lengths to show that she is everything that you described about her faith. She's atheist, and there's this. I didn't put it on the discussion.
You could argue
but
that being a modern woman also means that she does her job, and she has to go to her job, and being famous and being a part of the spotlight. You could argue that is part of that. But you know, I don't know. It's fine. I'm disagreeing with.
I love it.
Blake Snyder. Like, who am I? You know. So whatever.
He gets.
You're Bob.
Yeah, right. I've seen more movies than him.
I think Blake gets a lot of his. As much as I like his things, I actually disagree with a lot of his analysis of movies.
Right.
So it's all good.
We've
there's a lot
past.
of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of things.
There's no right answer. That's the best part.
Right.
It almost sounded like you were coughing bullshit.
No,
on the side.
I'm actually coughing.
The only
I'm just like, he didn't put his mom there. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything more about the sin?
No, that's why it's on there. That was great.
It's a good discussion point.
You
That
know,
was great.
I kind of want to hear from other people.
I do too. Tell us what you
Tell us
think.
what you think.
Well, here's the funny thing about it. Like, here's the thing that's hard to place my head around. I think we understand that what she's doing is not a sin, like us.
Yes.
Now in the modern age.
Right.
But
Yes.
in the 1970s,
That's what
it
I'm
was
trying to
so
say.
rare. Like,
That's what I'm trying to say.
it's hard to say without talking to the writer. Now, on the flip side,
Being an atheist in the 1970s, though,
is
Yes,
also a
right.
big time
Also
sin.
faux pas.
right.
All of these things are very much,
Double whammy.
Right.
Now, do I think William Friedkin thought that a modern woman who
No.
had her own job and stuff
No.
Not in the
was a
least.
sin?
Not in the
No.
least.
Do I think William Peter Blatty may have? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'd have to remember.
I don't know either.
I wasn't focused on those kind of things back in the 1970s to really pay attention.
Right.
But I can tell you that if my mother saw this movie and stuff back then, she probably there probably was a sense like, oh, she works, and she leaves her kids to somebody else, and she's divorced, and there would be a certain sense.
Look what happens.
That that was a bad thing.
It's a soup, right? Like the neglect comes with the atheism and the humanism and modernism and all that.
But this only works if the audience feels like, oh, she did the wrong thing. That's why, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be close to my kid, and therefore they'll be okay. That's the only way it works, and I can't really. Whether or not our current audience,
I don't feel like she's not close though. Even back when I watched it late, like in the 90s, that's never been a thing for me.
No, I think they have a good relationship.
Yeah.
But I do think the movie is going to great lengths to show that she doesn't get to spend time with her.
Yeah, it could use. The weird thing is Reagan is almost under the influence from the beginning. So
yeah, she's always
when she's saying, "Hey,
she already talked to Captain Howdy," right? Like she already.
I hear you like Mr. Burke or whatever and all that stuff. It's influence. So you don't get the side of her that's saying, "Mom, I miss you." You know what I mean? There's that side of it isn't there. So it's like
the catalyst for all that has already happened before. We're in media res of all that.
So that's what throws it off a little bit because it feels like she's already starting to be possessed.
I was going to say at the beginning, the sin is kind of just using a Ouija board.
It's
kind of
honestly that you know what I mean. There is truth to that. I mean there is.
But you could say that she got into it because of the parents were
right. It's like drugs, right?
Well,
it's
the parents
like
are atheists. They don't believe in anything. Use a Ouija board or whatever. Go ahead.
It's like in the 70s, she was smoking dope. Your kids dope, and they got into bad stuff, and then they were possessed. Then they started cussing, and then they murdered a guy.
I just came up with a great title for your Pez movie, Jamie. Possessed.
Oh,
Jesus.
Man, I'm pitching
Green light. Fucking great.
Green light.
Possessed.
Possession.
4 quadrant, baby.
Yeah. Just think of all the Pez dispensers we'll sell on Halloween.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about selling Pez dispensers.
Of course,
not the movie.
Yeah, they spit out like little green pea soup.
Yes,
tablets.
Shit writes itself.
Man,
but they're green apple flavored. They're not puke flavored.
Yes.
Yeah. Guys, I gotta go.
There's one random, just like the mystery jelly beans.
Right.
There's one random that tastes like puke. I got the puke one, dude.
That's such a 90s idea. Okay, you want to talk about horror subgenres?
Yeah. So this is another thing I've been toying with. So we talked about the Blake Snyder genres, and I've thought that Monster in the House has its own series of subgenres. So once you determine you're a monster in the house, you have a monster, you have a house, and you have a sin. I've come up with a few other subgenres, and these are almost ones I'd like to brainstorm because, like, even if audience members or you guys have other ones that maybe I could come up with, I'm always adding to this little document I'm messing around with. So, so here are my subgenres. And they kind of explain themselves, so I'll go through them really fast. There's monster buddy is my first one. So, there's buddy love, but the monster buddy is the hero has a monster as a friend or confidant, someone who's looking out for them in a monstrous way. So Phantom of the Opera kind of stories. Megan might be this kind of story. Single white female, even though not a horror movie, but a monster in the house story might be this kind of movie. So the next one is I'm the Monster. And in this one, the hero who either through disease, curse, possession, or mental infliction becomes a monster. The horror comes from their lack of control over their impulses or inability to judge right from wrong. So these are things like The Fly or even American Psycho, or maybe even The Shining, even though it kind of happens, a little later, I suppose. Keep Them Out, which is just trying to keep monsters out of like a building or a place or some kind of
Precinct
perimeter.
13 or something like that.
Exactly. The Purge, Green Room, something like that. So that's the other one I have.
Rio Bravo.
Yeah.
So many.
Escape the Lair, which means they're trapped and they have to get out, and there's a monster in the trap. So the Blair Witch Project, Don't Breathe, something like that. Somewhere where they're trapped in a place of the monster and trying to get out. Last Survivor Standing, and these are your kind of Screams, Halloween, Friday the 13th. And by the way, I have elements for all these that maybe one in a future podcast we can talk about. But What the Curse. So this is the one I think The Exorcist falls under. The difference between What the Curse and I'm the Monster is in this one, the hero or group of heroes has to deal with a curse or outbreak that threatens not only their own lives, but maybe the lives of others as well. So it's not like they're the monster, but there's a curse or something. There's some kind of thing that they can't control, something that's almost metaphoric of disease or something like that. And I think this particular, The Exorcist has this. Now, I have two elements of these, and this is almost what I want to, this is almost the improv part. But I'm thinking The Exorcist doesn't have either of these necessarily, or maybe it has one. So two elements I have. One is I call Dead by Dawn. There's usually some urgency to find the solution as it intensifies or the outbreak spreads, leaving little time for mistakes. And this does have that. I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, she looks not okay.
She's dying, man.
She's going to die.
Yeah. If they don't do it fast, because there's even part of me that during the movie, like when he leaves to kind of go home from his day job, I'm like, that part always bugs me. It's like there should be some urgency to this, right? I mean, she's killing people up there in the room, and she's floating on her bed and stuff. And at times there doesn't seem like an urgency, even though the editing makes it seem kind of urgent. But if you figure the decision making of the church and stuff like that, and getting the priest there and all is a little slower, then I'm always like, what's going on at night? That night, or
I feel like that's intentional from a tension standpoint. Like they want us to be like, "Her, come on, make a decision."
Off-screen movie kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other element I have for What the Curse is Dark Dilemma. Usually the heroes are forced to make painful decisions to protect others or end the curse.
Right.
I think that's there too.
That's totally there.
He chooses to take in the demon. I mean, that's
true.
That's true. That's the dilemma. Like he's got to take in the demon himself and then kill himself.
I guess there's
Yeah.
even a dark dilemma of sorts, just her going to the church, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like that.
You could argue Father Marion also has the dilemma of kind of knowing he won't make
does,
it.
He's not going to make it through
yeah,
this.
he knows that he's sacrificing.
So they both
himself.
have a dark dilemma. Yeah.
Right. And that,
Jamie, it tracks with your with your criteria
Bingo.
there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. And then just to round out, and I won't go through, but Hunt a Killer is my other one. Solve the Puzzle, and I think that's it. I think
these are great,
these are
man.
really
I can't
good.
wait to talk about them in future episodes.
Yeah. So they're my subgenres. Like once you get that monster in the house, then you can pick one of these to kind of further explore of what your monster in the house is.
Yeah, we can start breaking down the patterns that each of those have. That would be fun.
Yep.
It's good.
Okay. So they're the subgenres.
What is, let's try to make this less argumentative. What's the lock-in? Blake is wrong. No, I'm kidding.
I'm so excited to talk about this one because like when I was watching this, I was like, I cannot wait to hear what Jamie has to say about this one. Jamie, do you want to explain the lock-in, and then I want to read the IMDb log line.
Right. So, and it's funny because I do have opinions on this in general, which we've talked about before.
I knew you would.
But yeah, the lock-in is, generally speaking, a story breaks down into what Blake Snyder calls, and I always use story DNA, which is inherent to a logline. It's a hero trying to accomplish a goal. There's an obstacle in the way, and if they fail, something horrible happens, and that's stakes. And so you can repurpose it as a question: will the hero achieve the goal, or will the horrible thing happen? That's kind of the way you can do it. Once you know all of those elements, that's the lock-in. Once they all lock into those elements, and kind of the hero knows it and has to take a course of action, then you have the lock-in. So with that said, what's the lock-in?
Let me read the IMDb log line. And granted, this isn't like your standard best example of a log line, but just to give you an idea of like the movie that people come to see, right? Is when a young girl is possessed by a mysterious entity, her mother seeks the help of 2 Catholic priests to save her life. That's the movie the audience is coming to see, right?
Nope.
But that doesn't start for 74 minutes.
Yeah.
So Jamie, what do you consider the lock-in?
So I do honestly, there's 2 sides to look at with this. There's 2 sides. I think horror movies are unique in that sometimes their log line doesn't match the story DNA. And it's because of the slow burnness, because you need to keep, the movie needs to gaslight horror movies sometimes, not all movies. Like, and this is another thing I've been writing about. I'm like, there's 2 types of horror. There's one type of horror that becomes survivor mode at the 30-minute mark. Okay. We're in survivor mode by 20.
So they're locked into self-preservation.
Right.
Self-preservation
Don't
kicks
die.
in. I believe all horror movies end up in self-preservation mode at some point, right?
Yeah.
Certain horror movies end up at the 25-minute mark. Don't Breathe or something like that, might end up there. Nightmare on Elm Street in some ways might end up there in some ways. Even that has a little slow burn. And then other ones have to kind of gaslight you, usually to the midpoint, or gaslight the hero, right? They can't let the hero know something supernatural's up to around the middle. Even a movie like Megan, for example, like she doesn't know Megan's a monster until closer to the middle of the movie.
Right.
And then Get Out. He says "Get Out" to Chris.
Yep.
In at the midpoint of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the very midpoint. Get out.
Yep. And that, I think the lock-in happens in that attack in the bedroom. In some ways, the lock-in that's suggested in this log line. However, I think what movies that are slow burns do is they come up with another story that progresses that isn't really the horror movie. And if you pitched it, it might not be as exciting, but it's kind of like a woman deals with her daughter's malady that may be supernatural, or something like that.
Yeah.
So the question is, when does that lock in?
Yeah.
And it weirdly enough, it locks in, and that almost becomes like an extended debate in some ways, right?
There's
You could argue the P, right?
Yeah.
Like like that's where it's kind of starts.
So I wrote down some time codes, and I want to see what you guys think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So 40 minutes is when Chris comes into the bedroom and sees the first time the bedroom is supernatural. That's not the records flying and stuff. That's just the bed shaking. Just the bed shake.
Yeah.
And the supernatural evidence in front of her. Reagan's on the bed screaming, "Make it stop!"
Chris jumps on the bed and feels it herself.
Yeah, and that's 40 minutes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
64 minutes is after all that medical testing. Doctors tell Chris they can't help Reagan, and they suggest that she finds an exorcist. So that's 64 minutes before Exorcist is even suggested to her. So, and then the crucifix scene happens right after that. And then the 74 minutes is when she meets Father Karras and says, what do I got to do to get an exorcism? So that's 74 minutes before she actually makes a first step toward getting an exorcism. So of those, which do you guys think?
It depends on
it depends
what we're talking.
That's why it's interesting because
right.
Standard Hollywood movies, you want to get there at like the quarter part, but
there's like the lock-in for the possession happening, and then the lock-in for the action to fix it happening. You know what I mean? Like like the priest lock-in and is separate from the possession lock-in. Does that make sense?
I guess what I'm circling around is what is instructive about this? What can you learn from this?
See, I personally think there's two lock-ins, and I didn't analyze this as much, but if you're doing your Save the Cat beat sheet and you don't want the Exorcist to come into the finale, and that's already in your mind. They're going to come in the end,
right?
Then I think you have to construct the story of the ill girl with the mystery illness, right? That eventually becomes supernatural, and I think then your lock-in is when she has a goal to figure out what this mystery illness is. So I think it happens very early. I think it's like,
wouldn't that be the peeing scene? Isn't that kind of the first time Chris is like, something's wrong with my daughter?
Yeah.
I broke it down. I can tell
I just feel like that's when Chris gets scared. That's like her first,
because even as she sees supernatural things, to me, I don't think she's completely convinced until like I killed father or I killed Burke or whatever.
Yeah.
You could argue
the peeing is 36 minutes.
Yeah. And it might even be before the peeing. It might even be like when she's lying and she starts taking to her doctor, but it's debatable, like, because really she doesn't divert from that medical science thing forever. It'd be different if she started with like her pediatrician and then she took it to the neurologist or something. But it seems like she just kind of stays on the same path.
And Bob, weren't you kind of saying that's supporting your argument that the lack of faith?
Yeah, the lack of faith. She sticks with science, and if the bed, I was saying to Jimmy, if the bed never shook, if she never had proof, this woman would never have assumed to go to religion whatsoever. Like, she has so little faith, she needed to see physical evidence of something else for her to even. So
we're seeing the sin.
Yeah,
the sin. We're seeing that sin continue.
She
just keeps going from this movie's perspective the wrong way. Right?
And it's why this structure, this is something we see in horror, but we don't see in as many other, I mean, maybe in drama or something, in pure drama. But this, sometimes the most fun for these movies is before you turn up all the scares and it becomes the ooga booga horror, right? It's like, because it feels more realistic. It's like, oh, what if I walked up in the room and my daughter was bouncing on the bed, like, somebody's going around. Yeah. And that's more interesting to us. But once we're like, it's a demon, it becomes a little less, I don't know, it becomes a little less horror at homey and it becomes something else. It goes off into some other territory to an extent.
Stuff we can't relate to.
And that,
no one can relate to that last 10 minutes.
It's
nobody.
It's kind of and that's why horror movies, but on the flip side, the reason horror movies work with this, while other movies don't, is because even though it's kind of low stakes, like figuring out your daughter's weird behaviors or whatever, because it's not like she's dying or anything. She's just lying and acting weird and some weird stuff going on. We know, the audience knows what's going on. So we have superior position.
Right.
So we're like, so there's tons of tension and stuff like, figure this out. Come on, go to the Exorcist. So there's tons of tension just built into this scenario. And the longer she ignores it, the more tense we get, because we are like, this is a bad situation, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's slowly cranking. Also,
the tests keep getting worse.
Intense, and you're like, God,
they're horrific.
And it really feels overtly like they're going the wrong way, And yeah, that's a good point, Jamie. You kind of hit on something I was originally going to put on the talking points, but I took it off. But I just want to highlight one scene, and I'm gonna put you on the spot and see if you have something on your dread flags that this relates to. There was one scene that really, every time I watch it, it makes me like super tense, and there's nothing to it, and it's at 27 minutes. So, talking about the idea of like, why does this late lock-in work so well, right? And that's supporting your thing that the superior position we have makes us go, come on.
The movie's called The Exorcist.
Yeah, talk to the priest. Anyway, there is a scene where she's trying to call. It's at 27 minutes. So the peeing hasn't happened yet, and she's calling Reagan's dad because she's angry that her dad didn't call for his birthday. And every time the operator says something, she uses the Lord's name in vain, like aggressively. She says, I've been on the line for 20 minutes. Jesus Christ. Right. You're like, ooh, don't say it. And then like the next line, she's like, what, are you taking a literacy test to get that job? For Christ's sakes. And you're like, ooh, it's like the Ghostbusters 2 ooze, right? When they're like saying shit to the ooze and
it keeps bubbling up. Right.
Bubbling. And then she says, don't tell me to calm down. God damn it. Like, she almost sounds like a demon, right? Like, so I don't know which one of your dread flags that is, Jamie, but that scene, I was just like, it's so fucking clever.
That might have been the sin, the hell scene.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have these things called.
I get so tense when I watch that scene.
Yeah, I have these things called dread flags that I kind of evolved from talking about these things on this podcast. That started with what was that movie?
Barbarian.
It was
Justin
Barbarian, because he said he read a book about red flags in dating or relationships, and he put those in the movie. And I realized that's what dread really is. It's a series of red flags that are either ignored by a hero or maybe even they're noticed by the hero, but the audience always notices them. So anyway, one of the ones of my big list of dread flags, I have provoking the monster.
There it is.
Yeah. Though honestly, it's like one that what you said, I almost might need an extra one in provoking the monster, because one is like summoning the beast, like doing something that the character,
the Ouija board,
unknowingly will attract the monster's attention. And
because the Ghostbusters 2 version is provoking the monster, but this version is she doesn't know there's ooze to make bubble up.
Right. And the second one I have is
I love that you're using Ghostbusters 2.
The second one I have is probably closer. It's mocking the beast. And even though this is mocking God, the beast's enemy, you know what I mean? It's almost like cutting them off. It's kind of similar in some ways. It's kind of like using this language that's more powerful.
Totally. Provoking the monster is perfect, because that's exactly what I felt when I'm watching that, and I just go, "Oh, stop saying it!"
Yeah, it could. It's almost like it's fueling.
Don't
the monster.
say Candyman again.
Yeah. But no, it's good.
So anyway,
it's good. That scene, that I always notice that scene, Jimmy too. So it's very
so
intentional.
Simple, dude.
It's very
so
intentional.
Simple.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about burying exposition with a laugh?
Yeah, I put this on here. It's just a quick note because as we said, this is the oldest movie we've ever talked about. And I love when we watch these older movies, we find the craft that we're still seeing today, still using today, still talking about ways to use it today, and we're finding it in these old movies, and it worked just as well then. So a very simple way to make, I'm going to use Ghostbusters again.
Do it.
A very simple way to make exposition easy for the audience to swallow and not seem like it's so on the nose is to bury it with a laugh or bury it with a joke, right? Like they explain Gozer and everything. He's like, that's a big Twinkie. Like they bury it with a joke, right? And I was really pleasantly surprised to see 2 examples of that in this movie. So she's sitting, it's at 64 minutes. She's sitting in the room surrounded by doctors. And after we've seen 20 minutes of medical testing that just gets worse and worse for Reagan, and the doctors are at a loss, right? They don't know what the fuck to do. So they try to tell Chris to put her daughter away, like in a mental health facility. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. Fuck you guys. And then they laugh. They say, well, there is this one outside chance of a cure. And they ask her if she has faith, and she says no. And they ask her daughter if she has a religion. She says no. And then they say, have you ever heard of an exorcism? And side note, my favorite thing about this is kind of thinking about the fact that society had so little understanding of what an exorcism was that they had to take this scene to even explain it.
Right.
Right. In 1973, it was something people talked about so little.
We had The Exorcist to understand exorcism.
Right.
Like
Exactly. They didn't have that. So this is for the audience. So the doctor is laughing at it, and the doctors in the room are kind of like half not taking this serious, right? And he explains it's a stylized ritual. The rabbi and the priest do this thing, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, the doctors are laughing about it. And so that makes it easier to swallow for the audience. It's easier for you to absorb the exposition. And then Chris says, so you're telling me I should take my daughter to a witch doctor? Because again, she has no faith. That's almost like her mocking the exposition as well, right? So that was just an example I thought that you could learn from. Even The Exorcist buries exposition with a joke, right? And then a second one, they do it again when she goes to Father Karras and asks him, she says, how do you go about getting an exorcism to him? And the audience doesn't know, so this is major exposition we need to understand. And he says, I beg your pardon? And she says, if a person is possessed by a demon, how do you get an exorcism? And he says, well, first I'd have to get them into a time machine and get them back to the 16th century.
Yeah.
Right? Because they bury this exposition that's going to happen with a joke. So there's 2 examples in this movie of our tried and true, the simplest way to make exposition easy to understand and execute is bury it with a joke. So I had to talk about it when I saw it. I was like, hell yeah.
Good. Father Karras I think that also adds to his character a lot.
Yeah. Oh, he's funny.
His
yeah,
practicality, you know what I mean? As a priest too. Jamie's types of horror.
This is like a big
new thing for the show, kind of, right?
This is a 3-parter because I kind of want to get Jamie to revisit sorry, Jamie, but I kind of want to get you to revisit the types of horror, and then I figure we can read these exercises, these breakdowns.
Cool.
Sure. And these types of horror, we've talked about these before. I
believe this is horror episode number 42 for us.
Right.
Oh,
so
shit.
We've talked horror 42 times.
And which is why I'm codifying everything I think about with it. This comes from Stephen King's Danse Macabre or Bare Bones, I think, his interview book as well talks about this. So he basically says there are 3 types of horror. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because I've changed the verbiage, I think.
And I like yours better for more modern, easy to understand.
Yeah, and I can't really remember it all the time myself. But anyway, the first one is dread, which we've talked about, which is kind of, it's the anticipation of horror. It's the wind up. It's the tension building. It's all those and I've, again, translated it to the red flags. It's a constant barrage of red flags that gets more and more tense as we go and get towards the big scares, the something that's coming. The terror is the something that's coming, the horror beat, the terror beat. And it is the monster attacking. It is the vomit of pea soup, even though that might be the next one.
That's
the spinning head or whatever, even though that might be the next one. I don't know. But it's whatever it is, the demon in the room or the monster or something.
It's the jolt.
It's the jolt.
Yeah.
It's the jolt. It's something that's there and it just, scares you.
And you've recodified that as scare, right? That's
the
scare.
Scares. That's the scare beat. Because a lot of times in modern horror screenwriting, producers will ask you, they'll chart your scare beats. And that's really what they're charting, is these beats, not dread. They're, you might have a script filled with dread, and they might come and say, we need a scare beat every 10 minutes or something like that. And that happens. I've had that request many, many times, like more than 6, or something like that. And I've actually been, on jobs, up for jobs to write in scare beats, to punch up scare beats because there weren't enough. So it definitely is a thing. So the scare beat is that. It's not the dread. And last but not least, I almost think this is related to scare beats. Like, I think the two are almost two different types of scare beat. Like, there's your traditional scare beat, and then there's the gross out. There's something that just kind of is revolting and gross, and and I think that when you see it. They're the gore shots. In this movie, of course, the pea soup kind of barfing and things like that. They're kind of the gross outs. Like, how can you just make people go, and not want to look at the screen? And they're the 3 types of
and
horror.
The way that I broke this down, Jamie, is building off of the last time we did this, which was the Jaws. We sort of figured out by breaking some of those famous Jaws horror scenes down that that scare jolt and the gross out often are 2 types of scares lumped together. Like gross out isn't always a scare, right? Isn't always a jolt. Sometimes somebody comes upon it very slowly and it's like, ooh, that's gross. But other times the scare and the gross out work together. So when I broke these scenes down, I did 2 book reports. Whenever it was a jolt and a gross out, I put them as 2 types of things together. So I thought it would be fun to do a couple. I say fun. The scene we're about to read is not fun at all. But I thought it would be very instructive to break down 2 of the famous scenes in this movie and show how it uses these types of horror, different recipes, right? It doesn't always have to be dread, scare, gross out. It doesn't always have to be that way. You can mix and match, and it's very similar to the good news, bad news technique, which is let's say you have a scene and you know what the pea soup is, right? You're like, the pea soup is coming. I got to put that. I got that on my outline. I got to write this scene where the pea soup is coming. What do? A really easy way to make it more interesting is to kind of sit at a blank sheet and you have your final moment in the end. There is the pea soup, and to just put a blank sheet and say, let's do a scare. Let's do a dread. Let's do a scare. Let's do a dread. Let's do a gross out, just play with those blank prompts. And then you have your final scare and gross out with the pea soup. And you can make the scene way more entertaining just by doing that. So that's why I thought this would be good to do.
And the way I like to think of my scare scenes is I like to think of a roller coaster. So the dread is going up, tick, 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 tick. The suddenness of scares can be quick dips, or they can be big long dips, or they could be a dip up, dip up, dip up. It could be really fast, or dip, sideways, or something like that, or throw you for a loop. The loops I consider the gross outs because they make you puke.
That's great.
That's good. I mean, it works. It tracks.
So think of it like you're designing some kind of roller coaster.
Maybe we could create. Maybe we can call that. I've been waiting for a name for the scare coaster. for this exercise.
Create
Yeah.
your scare coaster.
Scare
Exactly.
coaster.
Yeah.
We got to do Final Destination 3 so we can talk about the
Just
coaster scene. The coaster scene.
That's right.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bob, do you want to do the crucifix scene first, and then we'll do the other one where we read together?
Sure.
Okay.
You just want me to read the
Yeah,
document.
just read it. I broke so for context, I broke down the crucifix scene, and this has a lot of, this is, violence against a little girl, so it's definitely not fun, but it's an excellent example of how to do this very impactfully, and like make it make it scary for the audience. So I broke down the different what I thought were the different types of horror,
Gotcha,
beat by beat for this famous crucifix scene.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And this happens 73 minutes into the movie.
And for context, also, this scene is only like a minute and a half long.
Yeah, it's really short.
These are all the beats that are happening, Yeah.
Okay. First, dread. Chris is downstairs considering whether Reagan is involved in Burke's death, as the homicide detective suggests. Scare. From upstairs in Reagan's room, we hear a crash. Dread. From Reagan's room, we hear, please no, don't do it. You bitch, do it. Dread. Chris races upstairs into Reagan's room. Scare. Reagan's window is closed, but the room is windy. Records and books fly everywhere. Scare and gross out. Reagan looks horrific. Face bloody, physically deteriorating. Scare and gross out. Reagan stabs herself in the vagina with a crucifix while the demon inside her screams, let Jesus fuck you. Reading this is pretty... Yeah, reading it out loud is pretty
that's
rough.
why I said
it's bad. Yeah. Scare and gross out. Chris tries to take the crucifix from Reagan's hand. Reagan pulls her mom to her bleeding area and screams, lick me. Gross out. Chris's face is covered in her daughter's blood. Scare. Reagan punches her mother, knocking her over. Scare. Housekeeper run towards the room. The door slams shut on its own. Scare. A chair supernaturally slides against the door, keeping others out. Scare. A huge dresser slides on its own, attacking Chris. Scare, gross out, and dread. Reagan's head spins all the way around behind her and smiles at Chris. Scare and gross out. Reagan speaks with Chris's dead lover, Burke's voice. Do you know what she did, your cunting daughter? Dread. Chris screams and cries in the corner, horrified and powerless to help her daughter.
So listen to all those different types of horror used in 1.5 minutes. Yeah. So thanks, Bob. That was good.
Yeah. That's a pretty. That is maybe the most intense scene in the movie.
Yeah,
I would argue easily.
So I didn't do the stats, but that's so many different scares, so many different uses of gross out, and like 5 different uses of dread mixed in there too. So this second one I thought we could read together. We've never done this. This one uses dialogue to play with the types of horror. And we've never really broken down a scene where dialogue is like part of the horror recipe, part of the scare coaster.
Right.
So I thought that, Bob, you could do the same thing, read the types of horror and the narration. And then Jamie, if you want to be Father Karras, and we don't need to say Father Karras, you can just read the lines. And I'll be Reagan, and I'll try not to go overboard with my performance.
Okay.
Everybody wants you to go.
Yeah, everyone wants you to give it, like, chew the scenery, man.
So again, this is just to show how you can play with this. Okay, I can pile on a gross out, then I can do another gross out, then I can make it dread, pull it back, then I could do a scare. So anyway.
Okay, so this is 79 minutes in. Father Karras meets Reagan, right?
My script is actually from the director's cut.
Right.
Fuck.
Yeah. Okay, wait. Yeah. Dread. Father Karras cautiously enters the house. Dread. As he walks upstairs, outside Reagan's room, we hear inhuman, haggard breathing. Dread. The housekeeper warns Damien that it wants no straps. Dread. Karras slowly enters Reagan's room, creeps open the door. Dread and gross out. Reagan's on the bed in the worst shape ever. Green puke stains on her pajamas, gray skin, painful lesions all over her face, eyes yellow, lips torn, a feeding tube shoved into her nose. Dread. Reagan's arms and legs are tied to the bedpost. The bed itself is tied down so it can't move on its own. Its hard edges are covered with blankets to prevent them from harming anyone. Dread. Father Karras speaks to Reagan.
Hello, Reagan. I'm a friend of your mother's. I'd like to help you.
Dread. Reagan speaks in a sinister, adult-sounding voice.
You might loosen the straps then.
I'm afraid you might hurt yourself, Reagan.
Dread.
I'm not Reagan.
I see. Well, then let's introduce ourselves. I'm Damien Karras.
And I'm the devil.
That was a scare.
That was a scare.
Yeah.
Now kindly undo these straps.
If you're the devil, why not make the straps disappear?
Dread.
That's too much too vulgar of a display of power, Karras.
Where's Reagan?
Dread and scare.
In here with us.
Show me Reagan and I'll loosen the straps.
Dread. Father Karras turns his back to Reagan. Scare. Reagan speaks to him in the voice of a beggar he refused to help earlier.
Can you help out an old altar boy, Father?
Dread. Father Karras recognizes the voice of the old man. Dread and scare.
Your mother's in here with us, Karras. Would you like to leave a message? I'll see that she gets it.
If that's true, then you must know my mother's maiden name. What is it?
Dread. Reagan scowls at Father Karras. No response. Dread. Father Karras moves close to Reagan. Asks again.
What is it?
Scare and gross out. Reagan pukes green vomit all over Karras' face. Scare and gross out. Demon Reagan grunts back at him, drenched in green puke.
So yeah, I mean, you can see
good.
even you can work in the dialogue to create dread, and you can make like responses be scary stingers, right? So the dialogue is weaponized as its own scare, right? I'm not Reagan. You know, your mother's in here with us, by the way. Like, so I just think that scene was a really instructive way to use these same types of horror, but do it while using dialogue, right? And they mixed in some visible action too with the puke and he turns his back. Like, he turns his back on her. You and the audience are like, are you fucking serious, dude? You're turning your back on her, right? And that creates immense dread. So anyway, thanks for doing that. That was fun.
I also wanted to say this scene to me has always been the scene that speaks to what exactly the demon is capable of in her body. As in, like, you know, it's a vulgar display of power. It's kind of like saying, like, it's making an excuse why it doesn't know. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's like that weird thing, like, wait, this demon doesn't actually know everything or something. Like, it has limitations.
There's some limitations.
There's some limitations to it. It can be beaten. You know, it is not all
and
powerful.
they definitely use that scene to escalate its talents, right?
Well,
we haven't heard him.
Right. Well, it's like a duel between the two of them, you know? Like who has the upper hand here for real, you know? No, it's good. Shifting protagonists. That's a good thing. Why does that work in this movie?
Yeah, I one thing that stood out to me, you know, while watching this that I had forgotten is how, like, once she, you know, connects with Father Karras, which is not till 74 minutes, she takes a back seat. And she's been sort of at the forefront of our mind. And I kind of wanted to, basically, I put this on here because we haven't really talked about, like, dual protagonists or shifting protagonists much. And I kind of wanted to see if Jamie had any experience with this or thoughts on this or advice on this topic in general. That's why I put it on here.
Yeah,
So what do you think?
I don't know. I have a couple different theories about it here. My first one is that very much in keeping with the 70s and very much in keeping with the realism it was trying to portray, to try to say this is a real story. It feels a little mini plot at times, you know, like it's something that can do shifting, because that's what would happen in real life is instead of the woman, the mom, it could be a woman, but instead of the mom going in and doing the exorcist, she would hand it off to the expert exorcist. Now, you could see in a modern movie where they try to put the hero star,
the mom in there,
woman in there,
holding the holy water,
and she'd be the one that would have to make the sacrifice in the end or something. In fact, I've written an Exorcist movie that kind of does that, and I couldn't just have her like upstairs hiding, or something like that.
Right.
But this is more in keeping with real life. So part of me thinks that's the primary drive here. I have three answers to this. Is what's kind of funny.
That's
Answer
great.
number two is when I was watching this time, the Conjuring structure always, like in all the Conjuring movies, have kind of an unusual structure where they give you a scene with the two main characters, the two people we're familiar with, the Warrens. Then they go off and do like 20, 30 minutes of something else. Not the recent Conjuring, by the way, but the first two at least. Then they go off and do 20 minutes of some completely different group of people discovering they have a haunted house. And then they bring them in, and they bring them in around the 30 or 40 minute mark. This is kind of that on steroids in some ways, because in this one, we can't really intersect the two characters until the end, until the, closer to the last third of the movie. And those, what they do is they're flashing back to the Warrens in some ways, like maybe there's the nun is in their house or something, you know what I mean? Or some weird thing. They kind of stretch out their B story to remind you the Warrens are part of this, but they're not going to get called into later on. And then they come in and kind of take over. But this movie does something similar to that, which is why I think they give Karras this rich mom. His mom's dying. He's losing his faith. He's still, all this stuff.
He's a boxer. They show what he's a fighter.
They need to kind of keep winking at you and saying, "Hey, it's this guy's story too." It might not seem like it, but just remember, he's there, and we know he's coming. In some ways, that's dread in its own way.
Yes,
it's a sense of dread. So anyway, there's a structure that I've seen in other things that is similar, and The Conjuring comes to mind in a different sort of way. And then there's, of course, like something like The Shining or something like that, but in those movies, I think the protagonist shift or Psycho or something like that is more done as a surprise. It's
the false protagonist, which that's why I didn't phrase it that way.
Yeah,
because I don't think this is like
it's not trying to hide it ever.
Yeah. So, I don't think this is the false protagonist.
No. But that's when initially when you think about that protagonist, that shift, it's usually a trick. It's usually this is not in any way a trick. So I actually, that's my long-winded way of saying I just think that's the way the story feels more real, and the thing they do to try to make it work is to give Karras a full-bodied arc and his own kind of dramatic story that's not really about the supernatural, that plays up to the point when he has to come in and do this thing. So they do give him almost like a parallel track story. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I tracked a couple things, because when I get my clients, one very common problem I have, when I'm, I don't think I've said it yet on this episode, I read amateur scripts 5 days a week. So I'm often working with people who are new, or they're in their like third script, they're still, trying to get their handle on the craft, and, working through all of those issues in order to get better. And one very common thing that I'm dealing with a arc plot story or a mini plot story is something I call protagonist imbalance, which is like, we have a movie that doesn't have, I'm reading a script that doesn't have this dual protagonist structure where we have this father Karras, and the main character disappears for like 15 pages. You're like, wait, where is the main character? Like, imagine, if Luke Skywalker disappears from Star Wars for 25 minutes, like that's not going to work, right? So I try to get my clients to find organic ways to bring back those characters, at least for one scene, so the audience is reconnected with them emotionally. Because the thing is, the longer you're disconnected from a character, the less you can remember what's going on with them, the less you can care about their journey or feel like, you know, deep feelings for them. It's about reconnecting, right? Like as often as possible, reconnecting us with the characters. And what this movie does a great job of, when I went back and studied it for this question, is once we meet Karis, once we meet Damien, for the first 50 minutes, we don't go more than 5 minutes without being reconnected with him. So even though he's not involved in what's happening with Reagan, we're still allowed to keep catching up with him and feeling things about his own journey. And it isn't until that medical sequence where they're doing all these testings that we go like 15 minutes without seeing him. And then once that testing is over, he's back on screen every 5 minutes.
It's kind of appropriate though, right?
About. Yes.
Like the testing is so devoid of
of
needs
faith,
to happen.
of him, of the Exorcist. But anyway, so for me, the things that I learned from this was, you know, it sort of validated that thing, or try to keep us organically updated with their character,
right,
by like every 5 minutes, or like at worst every 10 minutes, right? And then the second thing is, they absolutely, like Jamie, you were talking about its own type of tension of their eventual collision. Like they absolutely are playing with our like superior position of how much these two characters need each other, and just, you know, promising they're gonna meet up. Like it's gonna happen. In every scene, you're like, are they gonna meet up or what? You know, it's almost like a lover's romance subplot in that way. And I think that there's value in, if you have a story like this where two characters can't possibly meet for the sake of your story until late in the story, to play with those audience emotions of like making it clear that they are destined to connect, and finding ways to make us desire that as much as possible, right? Promising this collision every scene you're with the one and they haven't met up with the other, finding a way to make it feel like that's coming soon. So those were the two things.
And to mention the scene in this movie where she sees Father Karras in the courtyard.
Yeah,
that's
you're like,
tease.
what is? Yeah, that's the tease.
Why is she intrigued by this man? And it's not any point in the movie where like she's looking for a solution of anything.
Right.
She's just walking home. Yeah, she's just walking home.
And at the party, do you remember? This is before she's even Reagan's even started showing serious signs. Like she hasn't peed on the carpet yet. Chris is asking the other priests,
right? Yeah,
about Damien. He's like, who is that guy I saw? And so even though he's not on screen, we're thinking about him. We're reminded of him, and we remember what he's going through. So yeah.
Right.
It just stuck out to me. I was like, holy shit, like this, they really swap protagonists late. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue into talking about Damien's arc.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have much to say about this, but I kind of want to just talk it through with the two of you and see if you guys have anything to say. It's pretty clear, right? He does arc, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I would say.
I mean, for sure.
It's hard. It's always hard when somebody dies with the arc. You know what I mean? Like the arc.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, there's not him like, you know, at the end with a thumbs up going, I believe again,
right?
Like that, you know.
But the Jamie, I almost did your sticky hero equation, but I didn't end up doing it. But we've talked about in the past the idea of the before and after snapshot and Jamie's photo finish,
right?
And he definitely has a badass photo finish, right? Like he asked the demon to come into him in order to save Reagan's life, and takes a selfless sacrificial literal leap of faith out of a window. So but I wanted to ask if you guys felt like because a lot of times we've talked about how some movies don't give us enough of the growing pains along the way, and I do feel like it's lacking in that, but I think it still works. So
I think a lot of his struggle. I mean, the movie he lacks faith, and he's a fighter. I think those two things are his essential characteristics, and he's kind of like a man fighting a war in his own mind, and a lot of that is not as visual as, you know what I mean, but it's a performance thing. On the page, I think that there's less of it, but I think that his performance sells it, so that
conveys it.
Right. Like Like his performance really sells that he's just inside of his mind. He's always struggling.
You definitely feel that. Yeah.
I mean, even at the end, you can argue that he loses himself at the beginning. I mean, he does punch. He's a boxer who punches a little girl like 3 times in the head. In the head. He loses
it's not
himself.
going good.
He loses himself once again and then catches himself and says, "Oh no, I have to do this. Is what I have to do." You know what I mean? Even then, he's like warring with himself how he should. Like, there's a part of him that's like, "I'm just gonna beat this thing to death," which is terrible. But also, like, that was part of what the weak part of him fighting with the strong part of him, which is taking it within himself and sacrificing himself. So.
That was a great observation. We have gone one character arc after another that we've tracked where they take one huge step backwards right before they arc. Like
punching her in the head is a pretty big step
that's a
backwards.
Big. They get so close and then they take this huge step backward before they take their climactic step forward. Yeah,
he catches himself just like George. Yeah, like he catches himself. Like, this is what I shouldn't be. That's good. Then he does what he should do, you know?
Yeah. So I didn't have much to say about that. I just thought it was, you know, it definitely is
that ending is, I feel like with this movie, that ending's not talked about as much with his ending because like the physical altercation is like kind of the thing that it defies all logic of what the movie's about, is saving this little girl. and he loses it. And he's a boxer who punches her in the head. And I'm always like he could have killed her just doing that. Like he could have almost killed
that's
her,
true.
like, just doing that. It's not that, you know. So it's always that always stands out to me, and I feel like it's never discussed.
It's a little weird. Like exorcism movies are really hard to write, I think, for this reason, because once the Exorcist could pull it off, because again, it was almost like based on a true story or something, if you believe it. So but in the end, an exorcism movie is really just like these horrible things happen. And then some priests show up and read from some book, and then all is cured, you know. And in this case, it doesn't quite work that way, and it seems like it's hard and stuff like that.
The exorcism kind of doesn't work.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work. Really. Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah. You know, he takes it in and then kills himself essentially. So I don't know. They're tricky to write. Like, how do you get out of it in the end? And now a lot of exorcism movies, what they do is you have to solve like a puzzle to figure out how to do the exorcism or something.
Reverse the curse of
and they make it feel less realistic in some way.
I mean, if you've ever seen Supernatural, the TV show, there's like 9 billion exorcisms an episode. It's usually just black smoke leaving somebody's mouth.
Yeah, I think getting to our next topic in some ways, the lack of logic to it or whatever is kind of what makes it feel more real.
Yeah.
Scary. You know, the fact that we really can't understand it, but it's just some weird ancient thing that works.
You mean for lack of a villain's plan or motive is what you're talking about. Why does this movie work without it?
Yes.
Well, we don't know the motive of why the devil or Pazuzu does this thing. So we know that he wants to kill he wants to take the girl, right? Like,
so I'll give you some examples from about this movie, and then I brought this up for this larger conversation because it's another unconventional thing about a horror movie.
Right.
So in the original cut, there's no discussion of why this girl. In the director's cut, there's a line from the novel that they put in the movie. Right when they're sitting outside the steps, when they take a break during the finale, Damien says to Father Merrin, "Why this girl? It makes no sense," right? Sort of like acknowledging the fact that there's no motive, right? It's all borderline insecurity line, right? Father Merrin says, "I think the point is to make us despair, to see ourselves as animal and ugly, to reject the possibility that God could love us." Now, the reason I brought this up is because that's as much explanation as we get as to why this might be happening, right? And one of the most common ways, and then there's all these like fan theories where like, well, Merrin, there's a grudge between the demon and Merrin, and it knew that he was weak and brought him back and blah blah blah. That's not in the movie. You can't get that from watching one watch. But one of the most common questions my clients who are writing horror ask me is this question: why can't my killer just be evil? Why does my killer need a motivation? And they find it very frustrating that like a modern audience demands like a motive from the killer. And so that's why I wanted to bring this up. Why does this one work?
I think there's, I don't have any terms like you guys always do, but I mean, it's real world stuff with the actual like format of evil here, right? Like with possession, even the myth, nobody knows why people got possessed. And I think you can also double down on it with like the devil being, the evil version of God. Lord works in mysterious ways. People don't know why God does the things God does. Right. Why would we understand the devil?
Right.
So this is very specific to this. You know, it's different than having like a slasher or something that has a reason. It's very specific. So
I read a book. I remember. I can't remember if it was Shock Value or I can't remember what the book was. But it was basically, it analyzed a bunch of the early horror kind of movies in the 70s, and it said how it kind of went from monster we couldn't understand, was scary, and then they started to get a monster we could that had a plan, and it might have been less scary. Like, so Michael Myers, we didn't understand why he did it at first in the first movie in Halloween, and in some ways that was more realistic and scary, that somebody could just start killing people for no reason at all. Like, there was more fear about that. And then as the 80s went on, the killers always had to have motives. I might be prescribing saying less scary. I don't think the book said that, but it just kind of pointed out that horror movies trended towards the killers having plans. And I think depending on the movie, I think the more Hollywood it is, they tend to have plans, or there tends to be some "why did they do it" note that comes up. And I think the more A24 they are, maybe, or the more
Lovecraftian it is,
the Lovecraftian, we cannot understand the infinite kind of thing, or I think we don't understand, and I think it's more realistic that we don't understand because we don't even know if these things are real. So movies like Blair Witch Project and stuff, we don't really understand what the hell is going on there. It's just like there's this monster and we don't know what's going on.
I'm reminded of one of my favorite Samuel L. Jackson lines from 1408. It's just an evil fucking room.
Right.
Like, that's like, in the end, that's just what it is. This room is just,
I don't know if it was Bob and I that had this conversation. For some reason, I think it was Bob, about Paranormal Activity 2. Was that?
It might have been us. Yeah, it might have been.
It was like, what's the ghost plan? He's like pulling the pool cleaner in and out.
Yeah,
of the pool.
it's like, why are you doing that, dude? Like, that was definitely me, Jamie.
Why would a ghost do that? Why would a ghost?
Why are ghosts always opening cabinets and shit?
Yeah,
like, what are
turning
you
lights
doing?
on and off? Like, nothing better.
Point.
There's no better evil.
Why are you always futzing around with kitchen supplies and moving shit? Like, would you just start doing it?
Yeah, it's like.
But if
like,
you explain that,
deal?
then it's not funny. But it's a good sketch, right? Like showing what a ghost is doing in a house in a real horror movie, and they're just like, "Okay, I'm going to move this door 3 inches." Yeah, all right, time to go to bed. Hard day's work done and accomplished. Let me go to bed. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? So all that stuff has no actual motive, right? Like in any of those movies.
That's true.
Why do the sounds happen the way they do? Why is Pazuzu in the attic having weird crash orgasms or whatever the hell he's doing up there? Why that? What is that? We don't know.
I think both of you guys hit on what I often end up coming to, which is, it's really dependent on the premise and the monster, right? And if it's a serial killer, you're gonna need that. They need a motive, right?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
and if it's in
Seven, he has a motive. He has a plan and a reason.
The whole premise is about his motive, right? So it's really premise dependent. And what I usually, when I get this question, it's a serial killer. Why does my serial killer need it? Well, because it's 2023 and that's the audience expectation. So, but in this case, I think, Bob, you hit it on the nail on the head. It's like the dark version of why does God do what God does, if you believe in that sort of thing. The inability to answer that is painful and scary, right? And so the inverse of that with the devil is a great answer.
You don't need to explain why the devil is evil, ever. It's the devil. It's literally the character that is the personified evil.
So that's why it works.
So, it works because of that, even though it's Pazuzu and that's a demon, but a demon doesn't need explanation for why it's hurting a little girl and lying with every word it says. That's just, of course, it's a demon. Like,
well, this is funny. This is the opposite of the Hereditary argument you and I had, where I was like, no, and that was the reason that I got upset there. And we don't need to go into that much more. You can listen to the Hereditary. Is that the movie half-assed explained, and my issue was the half-assed explanation. They took the time to half-ass explain it, and that explanation was very ambiguous and unsatisfying for me, and I would have rather they have just said it was the demon, the devil, and I would have been satisfied with that ambiguity. But anyway,
I haven't listened to that episode since we
I haven't either, but I remember that because I still feel that way. Well, Hereditary did it, because I have to debate these things with people who are, why do you think this doesn't work? Well, it worked in Hereditary. Well, I don't think it worked in Hereditary, but
culturally it did.
Yes.
It's still, it's still a relevant movie, but
it did not work in Beau is Not Afraid. But it did work.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either. But
yeah, but in the end, I just don't think you need to explain the devil.
I agree.
That's it. And for all the clients of Jimmy's, if it's a human, you might need to explain why a human does the things a human does.
Yes.
Because the audience is a bunch of humans.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you need to explain that, Yeah. And I think that brings us to our relevant listeners' question, doesn't it?
Yes.
This is a question from, well, first off, you want to say, if you have a question, where do they send their questions, Jimmy?
Writers Blockbusters Podcast at gmail.com. Send us your questions, your comments.
Yeah. Tell me why I'm wrong about the sin in The Exorcist. That's fine.
Tell me why I'm wrong about Hereditary.
Right. Don't go too hard on Jimmy. He took a whipping for that one. I remember on Facebook he took a whipping for that.
Like 50 comments.
50 comments, yeah. Jimmy doesn't like Hereditary. Okay. So this question was from Harrison Thompson, and I'm just going to read it. I'm just reading number one, right?
Just
Jimmy?
Number one.
Okay, just number one. Do I need to torture my main character? I ask because I don't like to torture people, but I do think it's a flaw in my writing. Things are too tidy, and I'm too nice to my main characters because I love them. Why is torturing main characters inherent to a great story? This is a great question.
Great question.
Very, very simple and straightforward too.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to go first?
I could bring up the thing that I said earlier.
Go first, Bob. Go for it.
Yeah, there is something trending on Twitter earlier this week that I believe me and Jamie both retweeted, and it was a person who basically made the argument that making your characters in a script or a film have sex is problematic because the characters didn't give consent to do that. The fictional characters. Yes, that is a person a human said those words. And I think to answer with this question in mind is that you can make characters do anything and it's okay because they're not real. Torturing them is okay. They're not real. I understand that. I think that also from the perspective of this question, you say that you love them. Well, the audience doesn't love them yet. The audience might love them, but torturing them, putting them through hell, and then showing their character shine through and come out in the end will make them love them. But they don't care at the beginning. Give them a reason to love them, and that's going to have to be through conflict and resolution, reaching goals, all that stuff. You got to make the audience love them. They don't love them yet. They don't even care about them. So that's the reason, is you got to put your characters through something to give the audience love for them. So that's me.
Jamie, you want to hit this?
Yeah. Honestly, when you think back to stories, they're all Christmas Carol, right? That's our story. You have a flawed character, and we as the audience know that character is flawed. I don't know. Does Scrooge have save the cat moments? Is there any reason
I am excited. We're going to do that sometime soon. Maybe this Christmas.
Because is there reasons to like Scrooge?
The Muppet Christmas Carol?
Yeah. Well,
or Scrooged.
Now Scrooge.
Oh yeah.
Scrooge has Bill Murray, so Bill Murray always gets away with having non-save the cat moments. You just like Bill Murray.
If we just do the Muppets, I don't think that he has any save the cat moments before before he gets visited. I don't think that happens.
Yeah, and I don't think Scrooge really I'd have to analyze. I mean, I can't say I've read Christmas Carol, and
I
ever
have,
in
but
my
it
life.
was like in the mid 90s. I don't
Right.
remember.
I always think of them as really horrible, 100%. But anyway, so usually we are presented with characters we like but have a flaw. So in some ways, in a weird sort of way, I wouldn't say we're rooting for them to be tortured, but we're rooting for them to change. And the story is what changes them. And then on top of that, stories, the fuel for stories, the thing that keeps you turning the page is tension. So if the hero is our surrogate, you want to give the story the most tension the story can have is by torturing in some ways that hero. I mean, I even have a technique for it in my book, which, so I'm a proponent. I think I might even say in my book, you have to torture your hero. I mean, I might use those terms, but in my book, Save the Cat Writes for TV, I have a thing called the broken compass. And the broken compass is basically a mission statement that you write about your character based on their flawed behaviors. So it might be like, I'll never spend a dime. I'll never help anybody if it costs me, for the Scrooge is obvious, broken compass. So then one way to write your story is to look at, their playbook, how they tick, you see the inside of the box. So then you can create scenes that force them to do those things or to not do those things and have a lot of pain because they won't do those things. Like if they just do those things, they would be able to not be tortured. But because they're flawed, it's torture. So you're really not torturing them, so to speak, even though you should kind of torture them as well. The things should go wrong. They should have bad luck, all that stuff. But in some ways, this torture is a good thing for them ultimately. That's the way I'd have it. But it's also good for your story because it provides the most tension.
Yes.
So
yeah,
they're my two reasons that I say
I love
torture for fiction.
Both of your answers. I'm going to pile on to the listener. It's a fucking fantastic question. I'm going to add into what you guys said, agree. So I talk a lot about the nightmare fuel exercise. The very first thing that I do when I'm, coming up with a character and figuring out who they are is ask, what is the worst thing that could ever happen to them? And this is in comedies too. Again, I've used the Plane, Trains, and Automobiles example all the time because it's a comedy. And Steve Martin's character is terrified of emotional connection with other humans. So the story is he doesn't like to talk to people. He doesn't like to be nice. And the story is constantly forcing him to be in close quarters with people who all they want is emotional connection with you.
Yeah.
And so it is one nightmare scenario for him. It's funny for us to watch, but for Steve Martin, it's torture. One scene after another that's just nightmare scenario after another, comedic nightmare scenarios. This doesn't necessarily have to mean physical torture. It could mean emotional torture, and it could be funny. But I'll give it, if you are interested in this topic, the Spider-Man No Way Home episode, Peter has 14 different nightmare scenarios, like Peter's worst nightmare after another. And that creates dilemmas. Nightmare scenarios create dilemmas for your characters, and that forces them to make meaningful choices. For example, in The Exorcist, Reagan's medical testing is not working. So her mother, Chris, has to make a meaningful choice to double down on the medical testing and put her into even more rigorous medical testing that puts her daughter in even more pain. So Chris, the mother, is not being physically tortured, but she's being emotionally tortured, and she's being forced to make choices for the sake of her daughter's, for saving her daughter that hurt, and just piling on the nightmare scenarios, asking yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen to my character, and making a long list of that, that's instantly going to create scenarios that force your character to make meaningful choices. And when the character makes meaningful choices, that's how you show the audience who they are and how they're growing and changing, or in a tragedy, how they're going the wrong way and ultimately never growing and changing, you know? So I think that torturing your character, quote unquote, is the key to forcing growth and change and forcing like creating emotional connection with them. Like you said, Bob, that's how we learn to care so much about them, because we see them overcoming their worst nightmares.
Right. We fall in love. Yeah.
Yeah. When you see someone overcoming their worst nightmares and they come out on the other end stronger for it, that is engaging, you know, that is rousing. So yeah. Absolutely. I am a proponent, like Jamie said, like, yes, torture them. Yeah. Make it as hard as possible.
And torture doesn't, like you said, I just want to make sure that's clear. Torture doesn't mean Saul, okay? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
It means so many different things. It comes in so many different flavors. We don't
something about Mary, Ben Stiller's character.
Right.
He's
just absolutely put through
torture.
hell. Right.
Yes.
Nothing goes right. Right.
Yes.
So,
but it's not physical torture. Yeah.
That was a great question.
Thank you for the question. Love it.
Thank you. And also, I just want to thank you. It says here that you support the Patreon. I just want to thank you for that too. So
that's awesome.
And if you want to send us questions, people, like, just to reiterate again,
writersblockbusterspodcast@gmail.com. I've been getting a couple a month now. I'm excited about it. So
very cool. I think that brings us to the end of The Exorcist, guys.
Yes.
We did it.
We did it.
Yeah. Happy Halloween-ish. And I say that as a tease.
Tease.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you want to plug, say, anything?
Nope.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah. Tubular bells.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.